Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We could all use some caffeine, I realize. But I promise that this is going to be well worth your time. I'm Chiu, co-founder of Boba Network and CEO of Enya Labs. Enya Labs, the team at Enya Labs, are the builders that created Boba Network and contributed it to the world. The clicker, excuse me. So before I dive into today's content, I just wanted to set the context. Boba actually is one of the first layer 2s that launched. And what sets it apart in the world of layer 2s is our focus on connecting the on-chain world with the off-chain world, and specifically recognizing that there's a fundamental computer science problem that needs to be solved. And that is, there are certain workloads that are so compute intensive and sophisticated that they can never be executed on-chain, such as running an inference model. So there will always be a need for developers to easily tap into off-chain workloads. So how do we do that seamlessly? And that's what we set out to solve, and we ended up building something called hybrid compute. And we started working on that even before the rise of generative AI. Now that we're in this age of Gen AI that was ushered in by ChatGPT, this whole new category of generative AI services has really reset users' expectations around what the user experience is, what they expect software to be able to do for them. So as Dapps developers, how do we then adapt and meet this change in user expectations? So the number and variety of these services just keep exploding. And of course, I asked ChatGPT to create this graphic for us, right? And developers that I've spoken with, often would say, I wish there were a magically easy way to allow me to just tap into the magic of these Gen AI services that are just popping up every day. And if I could just leverage them and add them to my Dapp and create a more magical user experience for my users, that would be great. Well, and that's exactly what we created for Boba Network. It's called hybrid compute. It's a mechanism for smart contracts to connect with off-chain workloads and including generative AI services. Now, how does hybrid compute work? It works in the following way at a high level. It extends Solidity contracts. So you code in Solidity, and you can easily extend your contract by calling off-chain resources with a very simple method, right? It's just like calling another on-chain contract. And end users only need to use account abstraction. And we've implemented hybrid compute originally in the sequencer, but in the latest iteration in a bundler, so that it's more flexible. So all the users need is really a account abstraction compatible wallet to work with it. And this requires minimal modifications to the sequencer, and the requests, the off-chain requests, calling an off-chain Gen AI, API such as ChatGPT happens during the gas estimation phase. Right? The results that come back are cached by the bundler, and then when the actual transaction is submitted, the cached results from the off-chain AI service are then used within that transaction. And this stands in contrast with a pushed-based or more like publish-consume-based model of bringing off-chain data on-chain. The push-based model makes a lot of sense for more static and predictable data feeds that are broadly desired by protocols on a network. However, when we're talking about tapping into an off-chain workload such as an inference model, where the output is non-deterministic, that model breaks down. But hybrid compute is specifically designed for addressing those use cases where you want to call your off-chain workload, call your Gen AI API just in time to get the response you need for that particular transaction, for that particular user, and to deliver that kind of experience. So I'm going to give you an example. We recently ran an internal hackathon amongst our engineering teams around, all right, let's hack away and see what we can build in just a few days. And one of the teams built this, an on-chain text-to-call data translator. It basically is an account address that understands English and can execute on the user's behalf. For example, right, you can say things like swap 100 Boba tokens for USDC on L2con trade, or approve Alice.eth to spend 10 Boba, or transfer a certain amount of ETH to an address, right? Now we're starting with some pretty basic, simple stuff, but already pretty cool, right? Using English. Now we're getting a little bit more sophisticated. How about transferring $100 worth of Boba to somebody? Oh, now we've got to figure out how many Boba tokens is that? 100 USD's worth of Boba. That could be done in an off-chain way, and with the results that come back, then execute the transaction on-chain. You can even make the transaction conditional on some sort of real-world or off-chain conditions. If it's sunny in Vancouver, then execute. Now, I grew up in Vancouver. For those who don't know, Vancouver, Canada, it's pretty rainy. It's only sunny for during the summer. So actually makes sense to ask this question, what if it's sunny in Vancouver? But you can imagine how you could actually extend this model, right, to have certain transactions that are only triggered when conditions are met, and these conditions don't necessarily have to be on-chain conditions. And these calls can happen not just between the end users and a contract. It could happen between contracts as well. And that's a huge implication because we are now talking about simplifying the interactions between two contracts, right? And lowering the barrier to entry for developers who are new to writing smart contracts. Yeah, for example, right? You can embed that call, translator.call, transfer $100 worth of Boba tokens to the caller. That kind of English instruction in your smart contract, that's pretty cool. Right? Imagine the alternative of having to write that code out explicitly in Solidity as opposed to just an English sentence. And remember, you can do this you can combine this with real-world conditions, with composable protocols, and start stitching together a pretty powerful smart contract for your end user, and that's abstract away a lot of the back-end complexity. Here is another example. Right, approve $200 worth of Boba tokens to the translator. How does this work? I'll just walk through the workflow with you together, right? So during the gas estimation phase, an off-chain RPC call is made, which then calls, let's say, ChatGPT with a prompt. And a prompt would ask ChatGPT to scan for a bunch of identifiable parameters that you define, right? You ask ChatGPT what are the relevant pieces of information you want it to extract for you. And in this case, it extracts things like what type of transaction this is, sender, recipient, amount, right? And so on. And then the results that come back will get cached, and when the transaction is actually submitted, the cached results are then used in the transaction. Now, that's what our team hacked together in just a few days using hybrid compute. And that in itself could, you can imagine, be turned into a pretty powerful foundational feature and utility for developers building on Boba Network, building on hybrid compute. There's a lot more you can do with hybrid compute. For example, right, combining AI with lending, on-chain lending protocol. You can couple that with a fraud detection model that's AI trained, run every transaction through that. Right? You can't really run an inference model on-chain, but you can do that off-chain and use the results in an on-chain loan request. You can flip the model, and let's say you are a Web2 fintech company. You've been operating for 10 plus years. You have a very well-seasoned risk model for underwriting loans. You can actually, in turn, use that model to offer on-chain loans to your customers. You know them well. You have all that data. You train that model, right? That's what hybrid compute would enable. And you can do things like an on-chain competition using a chatbot as the judge, referee, to see who's got the best responses. You can run a policy competition, for example, who's got the best monetary policy for Belgium or for EU altogether, or for the US. Or you can have ask folks to make predictions, right, and pull in real-world data using hybrid compute and render a new results, new winner every day, every hour, every 6 hours. It's really up to you, whatever you can dream of. So that's what we have contributed to the world in the form of hybrid compute on Boba Network, really bringing the magic of off-chain AI into on-chain smart contracts in the easiest way possible. So if you're interested, you want to build on this, you want to start playing with it, what can you do? Now, this is already live on Sepolia, and we're frantically writing dev docs, and they will be released as soon as possible. If you're interested, please join this Telegram group, Boba Builders, and we'll announce the availability of the dev docs and when hybrid compute will go on mainnet as soon as possible. And that's the URL that connects you to a web page for hybrid compute as well. So again, my name is Alan Chiu, co-founder of Boba Network and CEO of Enya Labs. And thank you for being here today and learn about how we enable you to bring the magic of AI into your dApps. Thank you.